Story 1. Years ago, I worked for a mid-size regional transportation company with ambitions of significant growth. This ambition began to attract a certain type of human resources employee, those who wanted to be in control and try to deny requests such as time off for illness. Back then, I was a good employee. I almost never called in sick, rarely took a day off, and when I did, I would pick up an extra shift to help out. For the first few years I was there, if anyone was legitimately sick, the manager knew his people well enough that he'd only make it an issue if necessary. Then came the new human resources hire, which quickly took away the manager's ability to make those sorts of calls. It was replaced with a requirement to call and leave a voicemail for human resources stating name, position, employee number, best contact method, and the reason for not being able to show up at work that day. At first, people gave generic descriptions, not wanting to be overly graphic or gross someone out. However, we were told that this was unacceptable and that we had to specifically lay out exactly why we couldn't work. Cue the malicious compliance. This human resources representative had a reputation for not being able to handle anything that wasn't prim and proper. So the next time I had to call in, it was bad. Like if the girl from The Exorcist ate a popular Mexican fast food chain first. But I followed the rules and explained how I was sick and couldn't come in that day because I was having explosive digestive issues from both ends. I added that if they needed to call me, I'd try to answer, but hope they would be understanding if I didn't, and I'd call them right back. Upon my return to work, it was impressed upon me that what I'd done was unnecessary, but they couldn't do anything as I was just doing exactly as they'd asked. Needless to say, we were never again pushed for a detailed reason as to why we were calling in sick. Story 2. I was just reading another post about sick leave, and it reminded me of my dad's time off on sick leave. Back in the early 1980s, my dad hurt his ankle. I think it turned out to be gout. But the doctors were running all sorts of tests, and he ended up with his ankle in a plaster cast. Part of Dad's job was to go out in the field, which required walking. The rest of the time, he was at a desk, writing reports, etc. Dad realized that he had enough work to do for the time that the cast was on, so he went back to work. His co-workers all wanted to know what happened. He happily told them and said he was okay to work in the office. The boss saw him and advised that he would need to be 100% capable of working his duties, which included field work. Dad told the boss that he had enough work to stay in the office while the cast was on. The boss said no. Malicious compliance. Dad went to the doctors and got sick leave paid for the entire time he had the cast on, approximately 6 weeks. His co-workers then had to complete their work as well as Dad's. Story 3. The shelter I've been working at for a couple of years now is over 30 years old and is quite notorious for keeping things that way. The daily notes are physically kept in binders, 1980s-style punitive measures are imposed on clients in conflict, and the electrical panels are labeled with cards that went through a typewriter. You get the idea. The floor supervisor, over 20 years in that position, emphasized that even though jeans were allowed, we needed to strictly adhere to the dress code. That meant button-up or collared shirts, no logos, only long pants or dresses, no hats unless you're outside, no visible tattoos, etc. In other words, dress nothing like the vast majority of the people we serve. We're meant to dress the way they should aspire to dress, said the supervisor. I was told other staff, including staff above my pay grade, have long hated the dress code and unsuccessfully tried to change it for years. None of them were bold little troublemakers like me. Given my previous experience with underserved populations, I also knew this was a terrible idea. Generally speaking, what people in these communities lack in financial resources, they make up for in their abilities to read people and navigate emotions. If they think you're an authority figure or acting inauthentic, many will outright write you off, and for the most part, they have a great social or emotional radar. The dress code said men's shirts must have visible buttons or a collar. I sewed 2 buttons near my hip on a plain t-shirt and wore it in. They said nothing the first time, but had a meeting where they weren't pointing out anyone in particular and updated that specific part of the policy to prevent me from doing it again. Next, I wore capris. After all, nothing about pant length was mentioned either. That time, the code was updated and we were informed via email. Still, no one-on-one conversation about it. A few months and minor malicious compliances later, our workplace gave us logoed t-shirts with the institution's name and website on them. Hooray, we thought. We will at least be able to wear t-shirts now. Nope. After a week of several coworkers wearing the shirts they gave us, we got an organization-wide email that the shirts did not comply with the dress code and should not be worn during work hours. Knowing me as the office rabble-rouser, several upset coworkers came to me independently to ask how they too could rebel. Enter the story's biggest malicious compliance. As a minimalist, I had no desire to hold onto a shirt that I would not wear. We had no input on the design nor color of the shirts, and I simply did not need it taking up space in my closet. The most reasonable alternative would be to turn the shirt back in and explain that, so I did. Coworker number 1 was moving soon and didn't need an extra thing to pack, so she also turned hers in. Coworker number 2's partner hated dark green, the shirt's color, so he turned his in. This happened all the way to 25 total employees, with some borrowing others' excuses. After 5 days, the supervisor had a box with 24 shirts sitting in his tiny office. He actually has to keep them on his desk, and I can hear him bumping his hand against them when he uses the mouse. 3 months later, they are still there. He's not dumb. He knows those shirts are a forget you that lives in his office. He cannot donate them to the shelter due to some other ridiculous handbook rule about organizational spending, and he bikes 6 miles to work, so driving them home isn't a reasonable option. He's tried putting them in general office storage, but his boss has said the shirts are the supervisor's problem since he ordered them. Currently, he's just stuck. We know it bothers him, but he knows he can't bring it up since it's his own rules that prevent us from wearing them. No dress code changes so far, but the top of the year meeting regarding our handbook has dress code on the table. 3 of the people who returned shirts are a part of that advisory board of 5. I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll finally be rid of some of the dumb, short-sighted elements of our dress code come February. Story 4. This story is a decade old, but another title reminded me of it. I was 18 and worked at a gas station. I was the type of employee that you could always rely on to cover someone else's shift. People would text me directly, and I would let the manager know when I showed up I was covering for so and so. I also owned a 50cc scooter to get to work since it was nearby. One night, I'm riding my scooter, hit a pothole, and hit pavement. Immediate pain. My face jumps out at me first. It feels like half the road now lives in the left side of my face. I try to sit up, feeling various scrapes, and realize my chest is stuck to my undergarment. A passerby calls an ambulance. Emergency medical technicians think I somehow got a 3rd-degree burn on my chest when I try to pull down my shirt. I take it off, and they see all of my skin scraped into my undergarment. It's excruciating. I go to the hospital, mostly because my helmet was actually a bicycle helmet. I didn't know. It came with the scooter, and they're worried about a concussion. They have to keep me up until I get checked out by the doctor who isn't there yet. I realize around 1 a.m. that I'm not fit for work in the morning. Not wanting to wake up my bosses, I call the store and talk to the overnight employee. I tell them to tell the manager when they come in that I can't come in and will drop off a doctor's note when I can. Around 6 a.m., I am allowed to go home, drugged up but concussion-free. When I get home, I think I might try to start unraveling. I go to the bathroom and strip. I'm covered in scrapes and bruises. I have a giant bandage taped over my left chest that goes up to my collarbone. My face looks like someone glued loose gravel with red glue, and it got close enough to cause a black eye. I say forget it, throw on a comfy tank and some shorts, trying my best not to have fabric over anything uncomfortable. I've been awake 24+ hours. I'll deal with the carnage after I sleep. 2 hours later, I woke up to my mom screaming. I come out, and she thrusts the phone at me. My assistant manager is now screaming at me. She said I can't tell another employee I'm calling out. I should have called her. She said if I wasn't there in 15 minutes, I was fired. She had a spa day with her mom planned and was not canceling to cover my shift. I hang up and ask my mom what the heck. Apparently, I didn't hear my phone, and she answered by recognizing my assistant manager's name. She planned on explaining about my accident. When she answered, the assistant manager assumed it was me and immediately started yelling the same as above. My mom got heated, yelling, "She was in an accident. How dare you yell instead of asking if she was okay?" She could be dead, and you are yelling. So, I told my mom, she wants me there in 15 minutes. What say you drive me up there? I grab my doctor's note, and we're off. I walk into the building looking terrible. Despite having multiple pairs, I wear my broken glasses. Unintentionally, I realize as I walk down the length of the store, I've developed a limp due to my left side being injured. I didn't brush my hair. It's a wild mane that replaces my normally neat ponytail. Every minor abrasion is on full display. The chest bandage is clearly outlined in my tight tank. I see both manager and assistant as they see me. I lock eyes with the assistant and stare her down as I close the distance. My manager stutters out the question of, "What am I doing there?" I turn my attention to him. Assistant manager said if I wasn't here in 15 minutes, I would be fired. I'm here, so do I still have my job? After he assured me that of course I did and to go home and rest, I gave him my doctor's note with a hand that scraped from wrist to halfway down my pinky. I turned to the assistant. I told the overnight person I'd bring in my doctor's note. Next time, though, I'll be sure to call you at 1 a.m. if I need to. Right? Seeing the look exchange between the two, what I knew had been confirmed. Her calling me was her doing, and my manager didn't know what was happening. I'm sorry about your spa day. If you'll excuse me, they didn't let me sleep until my x-rays came back. I'm exhausted. I left feeling as good as you can feel with road rash. Story 5. I was working in a nationwide chain pharmacy. I wasn't going to go into work until 4 p.m., so I had time to work on my land. I was driving fence T-posts with a post driver, basically a pipe with a cap on one end and handles on the side. One time, I raised it too high, and on the downstroke, it caught and tipped back, striking and cutting my scalp. I had to stop the bleeding and go to the hospital for stitches. I called work and told them I would be late and wasn't sure until I talked to a doctor even if I would be in. After a computerized axial tomography scan and stitches, I told them I wouldn't be in on doctor's advice. They insisted I bring a note as soon as possible. As soon as possible? Okay. Now, a gash in your head that takes 6 stitches bleeds profusely. The hospital will clean the area they are working on, but the rest they don't care about. My beard was caked with dry blood, and my work shirt looked like I was a victim of murder. My head had a gash covered with bandages, and blood had started to flow under the skin, making my eye black. I go to work with all the customers gaping at me and bring the 3 days off note to the manager. She kind of turned white and said, "You've got blood in your beard." I told her I knew, but they wanted the note as soon as possible. I picked up my medications and left. They didn't give me any trouble about missing days, though, on the bright side. Story 6. I live in an apartment building on the ground floor, not in the United States. When you order something online, the delivery person stops at my building around noon. I guess we're halfway down his usual route. I'm a student, and every lecture is online at the moment, so I'm home basically every day. Because I live on the ground floor, every delivery person rings at my flat so I can take in my neighbors' parcels. It's very common in cities in my country to do that. Me trying to be nice, I made an effort to answer the door every time it rang, so my neighbors wouldn't have to run to the post office to get their stuff. This happens maybe 3 times a week on average, so it was not a one-time thing in the past. Today I accepted 2 packages, and when one guy from my building came to get his, I accidentally gave him the wrong one. He came back a couple of minutes later and told me off and said to take better care of the stuff of strangers. He was not that nice, so I thought the safest way to get your package would be from the post office where everything is cataloged instead of the seemingly unreliable neighbor. That's why he and every other person in my building will have to walk 10 minutes to get their stuff in the future. I'm done. Edit. You all greatly overestimate how much I talk to my neighbors. We say hello to each other in the stairwell, but that's about it. Nobody will ask me why I'm not taking stuff in anymore, and I will not publicly shame this particular person for being rude. You all need to calm down.